Happy Halloween everyone, it's getting all spooky here at Tech Spurt Towers. I've even lit a candle. Woo! And to celebrate, I thought we'd dive into the seedy underbelly of the adventure game world for an 18 rated look at some of the most depraved point and click titles of all time. You might think that adventures are all like nice and twee and stuff, but if you dive back into the adventure game catalogue, there is some truly warped stuff. The following 10 games are guaranteed to leave a lasting impression, especially on your underwear. We're talking sickening gore, all-out atrocities, and total mind f***s. In other words, this is the good stuff.
I have no mouth and I must scream. This classic 1995 horror game was adapted by author Harlan Ellison from his own short story, and the result is both utterly compelling and also completely f***ing nutso. This torrid tale concerns a supercomputer called Am, who, just for jollies, has wiped out all of humanity save for 5 unfortunate lost souls. These wretched buggers have been imprisoned and tortured by the malevolent machine, and their only chance of redemption is to survive a twisted simulation that realises their greatest fears and flaws. Fun times. Covering such light-hearted topics as insanity and mass murder, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, or I Hinamayamus for short, is a laugh-a-minute jaunt through the human psyche. There are too many highlights to list here, but my personal favourite has to be the part where you yank down the dripping corpse of your mother-in-law from a meat hook and somehow manage to collect her as an inventory item. Nice! The Cat Lady. If you suffer from crippling anxiety or depression, then you really honestly probably shouldn't go anywhere near the Cat Lady. This hopelessly bleak tale is dark enough to drive even the most optimistic happy clappers to serious drink. The distinctly sombre story concerns a suicidal woman called Susan, who finds herself visited in her nightmares by a charming character known as the Queen of Maggots. In a blatant abuse of royal powers, this self-appointed queen commands Susan to kill a band of creepy psychopaths who she doesn't really get on with. The resultant jaunt through the depths of depravity is as mesmerising as it is shocking, including one bloody horrible bit where you're stuck inside the less than homely homestead of a family of serial killers. Those stark black and white visuals are particularly striking, especially when the claret begins to flow. Blood is one of the few things to be presented here in full colour, and believe us when we say that you won't be able to shake some of the Cat Lady's imagery for quite some time. If you enjoyed, in inverted commas, the Cat Lady, be sure to check out developer Harvester Games' debut release, Downfall. It's now available as a remastered version from the likes of GOG, and it's just as f***ed in the nuts. And get those happy pills at the ready as the devs are back with a fresh new release this Halloween. Hooray! Harvester. If you've got any interest in horror games, chances are you've at the very least heard of Harvester. This game is infamously schlocky and ridiculously on PC. We could go into the rather bonkers plot, which actually has a quite interesting twist ending, but we'd rather just point out some of the more batshit crazy stuff that you'll encounter within. Stuff like the literally legless guard at the military base who blows your brains out and accidentally nukes the entire town if you happen to be a wee bit impolite to him. Or of course there's the bit where a bunch of insects push a baby's eyeballs out of its skull before the mother tenderly pops them back in again. Lovely. Oh, there's also that scene which actually got censored from the initial release where a trio of super creepy kids cannibalise their own mum right before you spatter them across the floor. If ever there was a good argument to get yourself sterilised on the spot, Harvester is most definitely it. Sanitarium. Sanitarium is an imaginative and gripping adventure game, and it's now easier than ever to play because you can grab it for iOS and Android devices. We even slipped it inside our roundup of the best iOS adventure games, that's how bloody good it is. The protagonist of the piece is an amnesiac patient of a mental asylum who takes advantage of a violent riot to break free and figure out who the chuffing heck he actually is. Throughout the game you'll find yourself thrust into various hallucinations, all of which are quite disturbing to some degree. However, the most upsetting has to be the village filled with deformed children. All of the adults have mysteriously vanished, leaving these seriously creepy kiddywinks in charge, although they seem to think that someone called Mother is keeping a careful watch over them. The deeper you dig into the situation, the more you'll wish that you just stayed inside of that cosy little cell of yours. Mentum Dark Sorrow. Mentum is a short but fantastically atmospheric point-and-click adventure which can also be picked up on mobile devices. And like Sanitarium, the hero of the tale has also lost his memory and finds himself trapped in some dark, nasty place filled with doomed despair and monsters that look like giant with teeth. Basically imagine Butlins on a bank holiday weekend but with more metaphorical rape. While the puzzles and plot aren't anything particularly special, Mentum truly excels when it comes to nightmarish imagery. Everything in this game looks horribly organic, as if slimy tendrils of flesh had sprouted from the ground and smothered the entire landscape. The horizon is peppered with monolithic monstrosities, while disgusting creatures lurk all over the place, pondering the best way to pluck your head from your shoulders and slurp out your various juices. Frankly, if this was the real world, you'd probably head straight for the nearest cliff, rubbing your hands with glee at the prospect of eternal nothingness. Dawgseed. While titles such as Mentum draw influence from the works of H.R. Geiger, the 1992 Cyberdreams game Dawgseed was the real deal. This adventure actually featured artwork direct from Geiger's lovely little head, which of course meant that the game was madder than a barrel full of rabid monkeys. You control a writer called Mike, who attempts to liven up his pretty dull everyday existence by occasionally knocking about in a hideous alternate dimension. This creepy monochrome world boasts some very kitsch skull decor, plus some strange creatures that unfortunately look an awful lot like giant testicles. Unfortunately, while Dawgseed's concept is fascinating and there are plenty of creepy moments stashed away within, the game itself is the very definition of frustrating. Failing to pick up a certain item within strict time limits means you'll hit a dead end, with no way of really knowing it, at least until you finally realise that progress is basically impossible. We'd recommend just watching a playthrough if you're at all interested in soaking up some of that lovely atmosphere. Phantasmagoria. Phantasmagoria. We still remember this one doing the rounds back in the school playground, the first 18 rated game that we had the privilege of playing. And sure, it may be rather light on gameplay and distinctly cheesy in spots, but there's no denying that this game delivered in literal buckets when it came to the gore. The first Phantasmagoria featured several scenes where helpless victims found themselves stuck in deadly traps, long before the Saw movie franchise was even a thing. One of these traps, which rotates the unfortunate occupant's head until their neck violently snaps, could even have provided inspiration for a very similar set piece in Saw 3. However, the most vom-worthy moment definitely involves the killer feeding scoops of offal to his latest victim, until she chokes on the chum and finally cops it. Steak and kidney pie, anyone? And who doesn't fondly recall Crazy Don in all of his joyous Gurnon glory? This guy even managed to chew the scenery to bits when there was no bloody scenery. Pretty much everything you see here is CGI'd to f***. Rather more harrowing is the beginning of Chapter 4, where the heroine is subjected to what is possibly the adventure game and world's one and only rape scene. Thankfully, Don at least did us gamers the mercy of keeping his boxes on throughout. Ugh. There was of course a standalone sequel to Phantasmagoria, which once again traded actual gameplay for some truly outstanding death scenes. Wait for it, oh shit son, don't lose your heads. Spycraft. Another FMV adventure that really smoked our brisket back in the day was Spycraft, whose rather humble subtitle, The Great Game, was actually entirely accurate. This was a brilliant and engrossing experience which cast you as a CIA agent tasked with preventing a presidential assassination. It drew on the expertise of former CIA Director William Colby for added authenticity, and it really shows. There are many, should we say, mature moments spread throughout the game, but hidden inside is one of the most harrowing video game sequences ever conceived. At one point you've got this suspect in custody, the only person who can lead you to the true villain of the piece. Time is a ticking and a terrible choice is laid before you. Either interrogate her in the usual legal humane way, or strap the bugger to an electric chair and see if a few thousand volts won't loosen her tongue a bit. We felt genuine anxiety every time we threw that switch and watched her shake, scream and cry out for mercy. Damn, this actress is good. And if you take things too far in your quest for that vital information, you can even scramble her brains right inside of her skull. Even all of these years later, it's still pretty strong stuff. Scratchers. The excellent Scratchers by indie developer Augustin Cords is an essential purchase if you haven't already been scared shitless by this rather chilling tale. This first-person adventure starts in quite an innocuous fashion. You've just bought yourself a slightly creepy abandoned house out in the middle of nowhere, as you do, and your first task is to get the electricity working and the water running. However, while the old place is distinctly unsettling during the day, it's absolutely bloody horrible come nightfall. A strange scratching noise is keeping you awake, and it's only by exploring those shadowy halls and breaking your way into mysteriously locked rooms that you eventually figure out what the cause is. To say any more would be spoilerific, so definitely go pick up this awesome adventure if you want to be genuinely creeped out. The Last Door. Don't be fooled by those distinctly low-res graphics. The Last Door is nuttier than a squirrel's fridge and just as terrifying as anything with 4K graphics. This episodic gothic horror adventure sees you summoned to the unnecessarily dark and sinister house of a former friend. After taking one quick look at the place, most people would probably jump straight back in a taxi and bugger off back home to watch Match of the Day. But this is the 19th century and there is no Match of the Day, so of course instead you decide to just head on inside and have a bit of a wander about. It's not long of course before supernatural shenanigans have you questioning your very sanity, and while we won't spoil anything here, the story goes batshit bonkers as you hit that final episode.
So there you have it, our pick of the top 10 most up adventure games of all time. Chances are they will haunt your dreams until you wake up screaming in a puddle of what you can only hope is your own sweat. In case you couldn't already tell, I am a bit of an adventure gaming geek, so I'll be doing the occasional little roundup here and there in between all the rest of the tech stuff. So have an awesome Halloween everyone, take care, cheers, love you, bye!